Hello, 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 sports biz campers. Welcome to day 2 of the Career Exploration Camp presented by BODYARMOR. You guys learned something on day 1, and that was to hit those buttons. Give them some love. Really great to be here again, and really excited to have all of you back for day 2. Just a couple housekeeping things. I'm not going to give a nice long presentation like I did last time. That's the last you guys are going to hear speaking for me, but just wanted to talk through a couple high level things. So the plan or the run of show is similar to what we did on Tuesday. So we're going to have a great all team meeting here, get in the game with these wonderful people who we're going to be introduced here shortly. That's going to happen from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Then we're going to start to change a couple things. So at 1 p.m., we're going to take a bit of a break. We're going to pull you guys out. Lana's going to wave her magic wand, get you all to the all-team meetings and get you into the lounge. From there, you've got 10 minutes to find a pathway roundtable that you want to sit down at. And that's different than Tuesday. Tuesday, we had self-identified pathways, and then we gave you a bunch of different pathway roundtables to go to based upon your first name. We're not doing that. We're going to make this a little easier on everyone. So basically, once we get out of here, you can go into the lounge, identify the pathway roundtable that's of most interest to you, and take a seat, okay? So you don't need to follow any instructions related to that. We're going to wipe that away. And that conversation will actually start at 1:10, right? So we've got about 10 minutes to get a restroom break, get some water, try to throw down some lunch or breakfast, and then jump into those sessions. And then that will be one session for 50 minutes until 2 o'clock, as opposed to what we did the other day, which is 2 shorter 30-minute sessions. So this allows you more engagement with the professionals, ask more questions, have more dialogue. You don't have to feel as rushed. And that was some feedback we got from professionals and participants. Okay? So this team's going to rock it out until 1. We'll take a 10-minute break. You find the pathway roundtable that interests you, and then you're there for 50 minutes. Cool? One other thing to note, and I might ask Ashton and Tina and Vince to maybe weave this in at some point over the course of their discussion. If you're able, try to have your video on. It makes for a better conversation. The professionals really appreciate it. It's professional as well as you start to think about taking and getting reps for what's going to happen in college and what's going to happen in career. When you're in a meeting and Ashton's talking to his boss, like he's got his video up and he's talking to his boss. And when Ashton's talking to people that work for Ashton, it's the same thing. So try to give that a shot. Now, we recognize if you don't feel comfortable or aren't in an environment that's conducive, totally understand, but still try to engage via the chat because that's what the professionals are here. They're not here to talk to you. They're here to talk with you. And it's much more fun to do that when you can see smiling faces. Cool. All right. One other thing, we've got the chat function on the side, so I'll be following along on that. And then hopefully we're going to get you guys involved and bring you up to the stage. So as a reminder, if you want to ask a question, the best way to do that is on the right side of the screen, go to the Q&A and ask a question and or raise your hand and ask a question. Cool. If you throw in the chat, I might not see it. We might not be able to bring you up to the stage. So try to use the Q&A or try to raise your hand. Cool. Now that is me saying goodbye. I want to connect it to Vince Pearson, very proud member of the Sports Biz Cares family to kick us off for this great panel discussion. Thanks, Vince.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you for having me. I'll let my fellow panelists speak for themselves here shortly, but I'm super excited. I see we're up over 100 students. And I really like that they're able to send us these emojis that let us know they're following along. That's pretty neat. And I'm going to ask you all to continue doing that throughout the full session. If you hear somebody drop a gem, go ahead and let them know you heard it. So my name is Vince Pearson. As Pat mentioned, I'm a member of the Sport Biz Cares family, and I've been for the past 2 years. I am also a consultant in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. My primary focus is in sports. I spent the last 8 years or so of my career doing diversity, equity, and inclusion in sports. This subject matter is near and dear to my heart. It's something that I really enjoy doing because it ties directly to not only the industry that I love in sports, but the people that I love, which is all of us. So I'm excited to have our panelists and dive into this conversation. We're going to talk about getting in the game and where diversity, equity, and inclusion fits into this, into the landscape in sports. So without further ado, I'm going to have each of the panelists introduce themselves. And Tina, we'll start with you. If you don't mind sharing just a little background on yourself, what you do, where you do it, and we'll roll right into Ashton.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Vince. And thank you for Pat for having us today. And thank you for everybody for being involved today and for engaging. I'm really looking forward to just having a fun conversation with everybody. And as mentioned, if you have questions, we want this to be approachable. And so please shoot your question over. We can address it right there. So as mentioned, my name is Tina Sturdivant. I am the Director of Talent, Diversity, and Inclusion for The Athletic, which is a subscription-based sports media company. I'm curious if anybody maybe give me some thumbs up if you've heard of The Athletic, follow The Athletic. Cool. All right, we got a little bit. So we've got some familiarity here. So what I'll first do is take a quick step back and talk about how I got into my role at The Athletic and how my career started. And then I'll turn it over to Ashton if that works for all of you. So I'm from the Bay Area and I grew up in Vallejo, California, and went to school in Vallejo. It was we did not come from a lot in our school district. We are a school district that went bankrupt, and then the city thereafter went bankrupt, the fourth in the nation too. And so I share that first to start to let you all know that when I was starting in my career, I thought that these people on these stages in real life were very unapproachable, and how do I get there? And if I, didn't come from this background or whatever, I can't do that, or people just had more access than me. And so I want to let you know that anywhere that you are at, if you've got drive, you work hard, you can do that too. And so start there. Went to school at San Diego State University, where I began working in athletics, in media relations, working predominantly in college football, men's and women's basketball, soccer, track and field. So doing stuff like game notes, press conferences, things like that. That took me to the Oakland A's, where I was with their PR department for 2 years, focused predominantly on business operations. So game day stuff, marketing, promotion, sponsorship, and the PR aspect of that, rather than the stats and player trades and all of that stuff. And then from the Oakland A's, I went to Bleacher Report. And so I went to Bleacher Report back before anybody knew about Bleacher Report, back before it was this big thing on social media. I was there helping grow their communications arm, their talent arm. And so we got acquired by Turner Sports. And so if you watch any of the NBA Eastern Conference Finals, you were seeing Turner, you were seeing Bleacher stuff. And so I was there for 6.5 years helping grow our media and talent arm. And so that was getting our writers, our people on radio and TV appearances, everything from your local sports talk radio station to CNN, and helping get our writers and our content in front of folks. And so through that, I worked in also in events and started to begin getting our brand as present on the back end, doing diversity stuff and helping grow our employee base and being at diversity focused organizations like National Association of Black Journalists, Association for Women in Sports Media. Through that, I worked in events and did everything from Super Bowl to NBA All-Star Game activations and worked in marketing. So I was there for 6.5 years, took a couple pit stops after I left there in 2018 and was working in the tech world, and then for Northwestern University with their undergraduate and graduate students. And that took me to The Athletic last year, where I began in this role as talent D&I director. And so that's kind of my long, short story of how we got here today. And then we'll be talking more today about my role in DEI at The Athletic. But I wanted to give you all a baseline of understanding of where my career path took me today. And so with that, I will turn it over to Ashton to introduce himself.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tina and Vince and Patrick. Thank you for also extending the olive branch to have me here today. It's greatly appreciated. My name is Ashton Henderson. First of all, let me take a step back and say, I too love all this energy and emojis that are coming across the screen. I feel like I'm with you all, 117 strong and growing. So much love to wherever you reside in this geographical location. So thank you, thank you, thank you. With that being said, Ashton Henderson, I prefer and use for my pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm from the best city in America, Tallahassee, Florida. If you know T-Pain, if you watch This Is Pop, you'll know why we pop and why we're the best city in America with that too. So shameless plug for him on Netflix. But my background, I was a former student athlete at Michigan State University. I played football for Mark D'Antonio. Back in the early 2000s, I played defensive back and also corner and safety and nickel, just depending on the package and the down and distance and when I can get on the field. So with that, as most student athletes, you want to go pro. And I had the aspiration to go play in the NFL, but I hurt my knee going into my senior year, sprained my MCL, PCL, LCL, all the ligaments in my left knee, but couldn't bounce back to the way in which I would liked to. However, I was able to build some really awesome relationships while I was a student athlete. And after my playing days are over, I graduated with my degree in advertising and went on to grad school and worked in our student athlete support services unit. I was a GA for 2 years, working and helping student athletes chart a path to their career for success. So I did that, got my first real-time job back in my hometown in Tallahassee, Florida, working at Florida State University as an academic coordinator for our football team and track and field and cross country. Then after that experience, life is about relationships. You'll hear that often. My boss who hired me at Florida State went to Clemson University and asked me to come with him once he got settled. So I packed up, went to Clemson University for 3 years to serve as the associate director for football academic services and to create some DE&I programs on Clemson University's campus. Did that for 3 years. Guess what? I went back to Tallahassee. There's a theme here. Went back to Tallahassee to curate and lead a character development and leadership course, and also wrote a book during that time to help student athletes become successful and learn from the pitfalls that I had while I was in college, entitled Beyond the Gridiron, How to Successfully Transition into Collegiate Sports. From that opportunity, got promoted at Florida State to Assistant Athletic Director for Student Athlete Development and Sport Administrator for our football and track and field and cross country program. And this amazing opportunity opened up in the NBA, which I've always wanted to work in pro sports. So from that opportunity led to me being and earning that opportunity as the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the Detroit Pistons, where we continuously and are adamantly powering humanity each and every single day. And you know, Detroit basketball, #1 draft pick in the lottery, a lot of things on the docket right now, and making sure that we're prepared. But I'm excited for this dialogue today. As Vince alluded to, diversity, equity, and inclusion is near and dear to each and every one of us, and we're truly passionate about it. I'm excited to have a dialogue more so today. So keep those questions coming, and I'll yield it back to Vince so we can get rolling.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I know I'm excited for this conversation now off the introductions of our panelists. So I do want to drop a quick reminder. Use the chat, use the Q&A function to submit your questions. I've got a list of questions. I have no problem taking this conversation on for myself. I'd love to talk to these people if there was nobody watching. But we want to make sure that your questions are answered and prioritized. So as you listen in, feel free to ask your questions and we'll make sure we get to those. I want to do a little bit of context for this thing called diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'm glad we got these emojis. I'm going to ask, if you agree with the following statement, I'm going to ask you to send a hand clap. So here's the statement. I believe that men and women should be paid equally for doing the same job. If you believe that, send a hand clap emoji. All right. Okay. Just about, I think that was close to 120. So I'll receive that. All right. Another statement. And if you agree with this one, I will ask that you send the heart emoji. So if you believe in this, send the heart emoji. I believe that everyone should have the same opportunities to get the careers they want in sports. All right, so see some hearts coming in. Okay, so good. We got some folks who are believers. Absolutely receive that. Good, we see the hearts coming. So my final statement, and I'll ask that you drop the thumbs up if you agree with this one. I believe everyone should love the work that they do. If you believe that as well, drop the thumbs up. Awesome. So we still got some hearts coming. Some folks are making sure their voices are heard. In a nutshell, I believe that is what we do in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So unfortunately, I can tell you today that it's estimated that women make around 79 cents for every dollar that a man makes in corporate America. And I know now most of you here today believe that that's not right. I can also tell you I spent 5 years as the head of D&I with minor league baseball. We had 160 general managers. One of them was Black. That would suggest to me that maybe everybody doesn't have the same opportunities. And then we know today programs like these exist and organizations like Sport Biz Camps exist because we're wanting to ensure that everybody has an opportunity to tap into those careers and then to love what they do. So one of the things I always think is really important, Tina and Ashton, is that we provide context to what it is, what it is that we mean when we say diversity, equity, and inclusion. So Tina, starting with you, when you hear that, and the words have been thrown around a lot in the last 15 months, diversity, equity, and inclusion, but in your own words, what does that mean and how do we bring that to life in our organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Vince. And thanks for some of that context. And I want to share with you all that specifically in the media world, only about 4% of professional sport coverage is dedicated to women's sports. So I'm gonna let that statistic sit with you all right there, to also just recognize that we're talking about employment today, but then also from the perspective of what I'm going to share, we're going to talk about media coverage. And that is really important when we think about the stories that are being told, whose stories are being told, and how they're being told. And so I want to also ingrain that into you today to think about it from that angle as well. So when we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think about it from 4 stages. And so first is pipeline development. And that's in thinking about before somebody even gets to your company, are we considering all candidates, right? Are we considering somebody who has a different belief system? Maybe has a disability that is sight unseen, maybe is of a different ethnic background, maybe has a different education level, right? If you agreed earlier and said people should be paid equally and we should have same access to jobs, then it shouldn't matter what you look like, right? Paper on paper, side by side, right? You should say, oh, the best person gets here. But then when we see the statistics around how many of a certain demographic group we have in these places of employment, that's why we're here today, right? So we think about how are we creating an equitable process and considering anybody who is qualified for a job, how do they get the job? Then when they're coming on into the company, how are we creating an equitable environment for them to come on? So that's, are they getting paid equally? Are they being explained to the opportunities that they have to advance and to grow their career and to be developed in the same way as their peers? Are they doing that at all? Are we making sure that you are explaining to your employees what you have to do to succeed and how you need to perform in your job so that you can get a promotion? Right? So thinking about an equitable experience in being onboarded in the company. And then I think about inclusion in the company. Do you feel safe? Are you supported? Are you in a hostile environment? Are you making sure that you're getting to work on things that are of your interest, your backgrounds, whatever? And so thinking about also from the content perspective for what I do, it's also thinking about who's telling these stories. Are we telling stories of women? Are we telling stories of queer people? Are we telling stories of folks from other underrepresented groups, and making sure that we are not creating bias in the media, which is already very existing, right? And so thinking about how do people feel included at work so that they can show up to be their authentic selves. And then I think about belonging in this industry, right? How do we give back? And that's the final chapter, is how do I make sure the next young woman, the next kid who maybe doesn't know how they identify yet, right? Maybe somebody who didn't go to the top school, how are they knowing that they can belong, that they can fit in, and that this industry has a space for them? And so that's kind of the 4 ways that I address it in my role, is thinking about D, E, and I, and then belonging as the B at the end of what does that look like holistically in this industry? So I'll stop there and let us move forward, but that's my.
No, and those are absolutely great. And I love that you're able to also bring in that media component. We look at this sports industry and sometimes forget the power through the voice and platform that sports has. Well, that comes to life at The Athletic, and it comes to life in the stories we tell. So I really appreciate that perspective. Ashton, super excited to hear what you had to add to that. Now, I'll layer in also that the NBA, you mentioned how great it is to be a part of that family. That's a great brand when it comes to this conversation. So I'd love to hear from you, not only what this means, right? In your own words, diversity, equity, inclusion. What does it mean? But then also getting started with the NBA, how do you get to leverage that brand to do good work?
Yeah, Tina dropped some knowledge bombs. I'm surprised the emojis and things are just going like this right now. There we go. There we go. She came with it. That 4% really hit me hard, especially as someone who champions not only women in sports, but in anything. I think that's something that we have to be cognizant of, and that you all are going to change the narrative of what that looks like. Yeah, we got Candace Parker on the cover of EA that's coming, but we got to do more. And that's something where it hit me even harder. So thank you for sharing that, Tina. And I know from my vantage point, diversity, equity, inclusion in this work is hard work. And it's work in terms of what we do with the people to change perspectives, give you a different viewpoint of how you may assess or look at a situation a little bit different, or put yourself in someone else's shoes from a various generational, backgrounds and various socioeconomic statuses in which we come from. If anyone tells you they know everything about every person on this earth, you're omnipresent, you have every knowledge point or things about anyone, I will challenge you. And I dare to say that I'm a DE&I enthusiast because I love to get to know the hearts of people and what makes them go. And once you understand that, you can start to cultivate and create equitable practices to help them have the success and sustainability that they deserve. So for me, I always take an approach where diversity is inviting someone to the party. Inclusion is asking them to do the Cupid shuffle. At one of my point in time was the nay. And now what you all do, the hit them folks and all those things in which you do with the beatbox challenge, which I found is old, but we'll talk about that at a different scenario. But that's all it is to me, inviting them and asking someone to be a part of your world. And also when you think of equity, I think about taking a big wrecking ball and the things in which are having us just don't have us connected and collected as a society, and using that system to break it up. So there's no fence, there's no barrier, there's no bridge that will ever separate what we want to have for everyone. Non-binary, as we celebrated International Non-Binary People's Day yesterday, and all those things in which we do to continue to highlight various organizations, people. And also Tina brought up belonging. I thought that is so big, where we talk about being your authentic self every single day and being accepted for who you are, and never change who you are, because who you are is what makes you you. And every one of you has a slice of genius that is going to continue to make this world a better place, so that one day all of us on this stage won't have jobs because we're going to get it right. And that's what we're striving and hoping to do in every single day. But for me, Vince, going back to your question of being in the NBA, I think it says it for itself. Me being a football student athlete, you would think that, I would align myself with a professional brand as otherwise, but alignment is big to me, and where I work and the mission-driven work and the things that I do. So being in the NBA and the conscious and concerted effort that we take as an association to shed the light on diversity, equity, inclusion, social justice, and injustices and things of that nature are profound. And I'm very fortunate to work with some amazing stakeholders and practitioners and people who share in this space with me, who are compassionate and passionate about making the world a better place. So as we, as a Pistons organization, continue to power humanity, which we're anchored in that and within our brand and ethos, to make this world a better place by really just choosing humanity. And that's just something that we and many others of my NBA colleagues have and will continuously do. I'm thankful for what has been started with the Kareem Abdul social justice initiative, where players are championed, and we want them to speak out on injustices and things in their communities and how they can impact. And there's a tier of how you get various compensation with that as well, in terms of showing that we want to improve. So that has come up, and something that's going to be sustainable for the years to come. And also just community work, various things in which we do, from social responsibility to really internal trainings and things of that nature. But I'm excited to continue to push the needle and work with colleagues from all across the scope of every angle, because that's how we get better. And that's how we've really worked hard to make that effort. And it all starts from the top. We have an amazing commissioner who has empowered many of our owners and facilitators to lead and do it with empathy and do it with direct and strategic focus. So I'm excited to do that and have that ability to share today.
That's awesome. And I'm going to, I've got one more DEI question, then I'm going to transition to career, because I really want to be sure that we can also talk about your careers and then career advice. But unpacking sort of what I heard from you both, hearing about the importance of representation, and not just representation of faces on a screen, but the way that stories are being told and who's telling those stories. Ashton made a great point. Be you, they'll adjust. That's kind of what I heard. We all bring something special to the table. And if we sacrifice that, then no one ever gets the benefit from it. But also that this doesn't happen without intention. The reason that the three of us have careers is because our organizations, or the organizations we work with, have decided that they want to be more intentional about creating fairness. They want to be more intentional about creating that representation. I want to ask you both sort of a personal question, but also definitely tied to the work we do. The last 15 months or so have seen almost this social justice awakening, not just in sports, but really across the globe. For those of us in the diversity, equity, inclusion space, it was sort of like our field of work was elevated overnight to this work that went from nice to have to paramount and absolutely necessary. How has that impacted you? And then also, how has that sort of impacted the work that you do with your organization? Ashton, we'll start with you.
Yeah, man, talk about civil unrest in the past 15, 16 months with the pandemic, coupled with everything that we faced as a society, with Stop Asian Hate, with what happened with the awful George Floyd murder and things of that nature, the attack on the LGBTQ plus community, transgender, various areas in which we see so many issues that are affecting us. And you have to have really strong and broad shoulders as a D&I practitioner, because you really lament and have the most empathy for everyone, not only in your organization, but for the global issues that impact and face or show up for us on a day-to-day basis. So I think, yes, it has been very turbulent, a time of reckoning, but also a time to really have the ability to go into spaces that were normally not accessible. If we're just speaking very candidly here in terms of having that ability to talk to the C-suite level executives about how can we improve these spaces for us internally, and what has come from that awful day and awful moments that were aforementioned that I shared. But the real change is how we sustain that. My goal is to put things in place where we're talking about this for the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years, beyond the point to when Ashton Henderson goes 6 feet under, we're still talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging, because those aspects matter. And I'm thankful as an organization, we've leaned in where we have a culture meeting and talk about those things every single month to improve. We're not perfect, but one of the things in which we're trying to do is make real change. And without real change, you have to have real conversations. You can't be afraid to really rattle the cage. And that's something where I struggled with and I had to learn to be better in. And that's something that'll come with time. You know, when you read more, you listen to more podcasts. Education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. Nelson Mandela's words, not my own. But that's something that I pride myself on, because when you're armed with education, you know things that you can ask those pointed questions to really make better decisions and help people and hold them accountable for things in which we need to hold them accountable for. So I'm thankful our Pistons family has leaned into that immensely. And I'm excited about the activations we have for future gains to improve the spaces, not only for those who work in our area, but to increase the visibility of people who don't or do not look like me and look like me, unlike me, unlearn various things we need to, and align ourselves with the mission of the work in which is to power humanity each and every single second of the day, 365 in a year, 366 in a leap year.
Great stuff, guys. I'm really been blown away by the content thus far. We've got a couple questions from the audience I wanted to bring up, and some of them are career related, Vince, so it might be kind of a good transition into that. So the first question was from Nicole, and then I want to bring a question related to Matt as well, because I do think it's relevant to this. So question from Nicole, and I think she was listening to what your guys' experiences was. I think across the board, each of you has worked in some way, shape, or form in college athletics, and now working kind of around the pro sports space. So I'm going to invite Nicole up to listen to your response, but give her a bit of a perspective on the differences between the two.
Hey, Nicole.
Yeah.
How are you? Good to see you. I guess I'll just say for me, the stark difference, college athletics is really, really fast. It moves at a speed. There's always something going on, the seasonal various things, but you find a rhythm and you stick to that rhythm. However, pro sports moves faster. And that's something where I've learned and had to really adapt and adjust and connect with my colleagues from across the league, because there's not much what we call red tape. So what I mean by that, there's not much hierarchy that you have to go to, or in higher ed spaces, there's always levels of approval that have to be done or seeked out. But the collegial experience has those different levels, whereas the pro space, you have access to resources, runway, and the ability to do things that align with the areas that you report to, or in the professional sense and world, your vertical that you manage. So think about it that way, as going up. So I love both of them. I'm just fortunate to get best of both worlds and their experiences. And I know Tina can effectively speak to that too. So I'll yield the floor to her as well. But that's just been my experiences.
Thanks, Ashton, and thank you for the question, Nicole. I would say for me, Ashton alluded to this a bit, but in collegiate sports, there is a lot more regulation because you have a governing body of the NCAA. And so you have to consider that there are an overarching set of rules that your institution still needs to follow. And so there are a lot more levels of accountability, of asking questions, of getting approvals, and we should be thinking about the student athlete experience, specifically student athletes, because we're talking about sports business here, of student first. But in my professional opinion, it tends to be athletics first. I think that we're seeing a lot of that happening with NIL right now, and allowing athletes to be able to monetize things around themselves, because you have a multi-billion-dollar institution of the NCAA that acts as a nonprofit. And so I think that at the individual level, there's just a lot more regulation as a result of the NCAA. To Ashton's point, in the professionals, you get to do what you want. You're working with pros. You don't have to consider times of workouts because of student schedule, travel. These people are getting paid to be professionals. And so your organization operates underneath your bigger league, right? If it's MLB, which is what I worked in, Ashton's in the NBA, you have your overarching league that you have to follow things, their rules, their regulations, whatever. But there's just a lot more freedom in the job that you do, the job that I did, specifically in media relations and public relations and sponsorships and things like that, and marketing of events and having athletes appear. You have a lot more flexibility and reign in the professional world that you don't in collegiate sports.
Great answers. Nicole, how was that? Good? I think she must have gotten stuck there. I think the one thing I would add is, in pro sports, like, the business is the sport. In college athletics, the business is the university and education, and then athletics is part of that. So that leads to a lot more challenges as well.
If I can add one thing there too, Pat, what I would say from an experiential standpoint, I spent time with the Colonial Athletic Association, and there were busy seasons where we would leave our basketball championship in Richmond, head up to Baltimore for our women's basketball championship, and then go up to New Jersey for our softball championship. So it was really cool to get to work with a lot of different sports. I am on the side of Tina's professional opinion with the NCAA and certain things for me that didn't align. But from an experiential standpoint, I was able to see so much and be exposed to so much. I learned to really appreciate sports for and athletes for I won't say professionals, but just the stars that they are. All of them are stars in their own right. So to appreciate that talent was something I took away from working in college sports.
Great stuff. I want to bring another question up, and I think it's part of maybe a larger conversation once again related to careers. So, and I would ask the chat to maybe jump in on this, but also our panelists. We have a lot of work to do, right? But 2020, 21 have been really watershed in breaking down a lot of barriers for senior leaders. So one is Kim Ng becoming the first general manager of the Marlins. Can anyone in the chat name any other like significant barriers broken as it relates to leadership positions in professional sports? And then however you guys want to, I know you guys don't want to put like a timeline on it, but maybe just a conversation around, people breaking through these previous barriers. Anyone want to take it?
I'll start a conversation here. I think that is very hard to articulate because I don't know anybody's front office, right? I don't know anybody's career pathing and trajectory and things like that. I will say that I certainly hope that it's sooner than later and that it's not, we don't have a first and a last. I would say that maybe the next big barrier that I see broken is Becky Hammon potentially becoming an NBA head coach, which would be really, really awesome. And she's more than qualified. San Francisco Giants, just because I'm familiar here at my graduate school, University of San Francisco, has a lot of involvement with the Giants. And I know that they've got a few women tracking higher up within the ranks there. But from a general manager standpoint, I think that it is something that's very funny. Pat, you and I talked about this on our call, but a lot of people think, oh, I want to be the general manager of a team, right? And what is the work that goes into that? You have to know scouting, you have to know recruiting and finance, and you need to know the PR side of it, and you need to know the operational side of it. And so when you think about kind of barriers to entry and women in this field in general that are a very low percentage, that means you've got to be the top of each department before you could get considered for that GM role. And so I see a few more barriers to entry from just the basis of the steps that it takes. Do I think that there are women that are more than qualified? Absolutely. But it'd be remiss of me to try to say like, oh, it'll be 5 years before we see this. It'll be 10 years, because I don't think that that's fair unless I know the inner workings of every organization in the big four sports, and I don't. But I certainly hope it's sooner than later, because we know that women-led countries like New Zealand and other countries in Europe tend to have better economics, better social support systems. I mean, I'm the only woman on this call here, so I'm going to say that women make the world go round and make it a better place. And so I certainly hope that we have women running these teams moving forward. I will say there is a woman, Vivian Lin, in San Diego, who is the first president of a professional football league, of arena football league, the San Diego pro team. And so there is currently a woman president in San Diego in arena football. And so that's a very cool thing. So I'll stop there, but I'll leave it to you guys to keep the conversation going.
Yeah, Tina, I could not agree with you more. I think Beyonce said it too. Girls run the world, and they really do. And without women, us three men would not be here today. So we thank for that contribution. But I one of the things that really drew me to the Detroit Pistons was the ability to work with a dynamic women who serve on our senior and executive team. So my boss is the senior vice president of human resources. She's a woman, Alicia Jeffries, who serves as our SVP for marketing. All these, Erica Swilly, VP for community service and social responsibility. We also have a woman on senior director for basketball ops, which is uncommon within the NBA or any professional sports teams or leagues. So I think we're inching closer, and it's conversations like this that are going to continue to have and be had, that women will continue to, I call it and refer to it, and there's an organization called Women Leaders in College Sports. And a dear friend of our association, Patty Phillips, says, women kicking through glass. So my sisters continue to kick through the glass. There's no ceiling to what you can do. And it's going to take people like us on this call as men to continue to be allies and champions for each and every one of you, and why you are qualified, you are enough, you are valued, you are seen, you are better than us on many, many things. And I'll tell you, my partner and I talk about this so much, and it's time. It really is time to move the needle in that respect. And I'm excited and welcome and cannot wait to buy and subscribe to tickets, whoever that will be. And that will not be the only point. As Tina alluded to, I think there's going to be more. We don't want it to be the first nor the last. We want it to be a normal practice where women are getting the same opportunities as men in so many other areas, as well as of those who do not, and folks who do not identify or have gender fluidity. I think that's important to recognize as well as to what that looks like from a non-binary standpoint. So we are championing you, whoever and where you want to be. And I know the relationships and the people will get you there too. That's the most exciting part.
And I'll just say, slight humble brag. I know Kim, and I know how long she had been working for that. It's according to record, the first baseball game was in 1846. I'll go out on a limb and say it won't take as long to see the next one as it took to see the first one.
Vince, back to you. I think you had a couple questions as well. We've got about 15 minutes left.
Awesome. So real quick before I jump back, Tina, I did want to give you a chance, and maybe just briefly, because I do want to talk a little bit about career, to speak to the impact of the last 15 months or so on just you personally, and then also you and the work that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Every single person has been impacted, right, over these last 15 months, for whatever that means for you. And Ashton was able to eloquently go over, it wasn't just Black Lives Matter movement. It's anti-Asian. It's the trans bills against high school athletes. And so for us in a workplace, and things that I prioritize are within the scope of my role, we have employee resource groups. And so that is employees who identify in a certain way or are allies of those people of those backgrounds. And we have 4, and we have for our Black employees, our female employees, female identifying employees, our LGBTQ plus employees, and then a mental health ERG. And so you can understand in these different ways how all of these folks have been impacted in these past 15 months. And so some of the things that we've done have been to create style guides from a reporting perspective. And so people who are of that background can give guidance to their colleagues who are not of that background, ways to report on women, ways to report on people of color, ways to report on the LGBTQ plus community, ways to report around mental health. And so it could be something as, big as don't use these terms because they're outdated, or even a consideration of something I dealt with at work last week where it's like, try not to use the term crazy. Like, that play was crazy because that associates with somebody's mental capacity, right? Maybe that play was wild instead of insane. And so I work with our employee resource groups to create style guides to best guide our newsroom around these things. We also, I host monthly DEI related brainstorms. And so that's saying, how are we considering different topics, things going on in the world, as Ashton mentioned, non-binary day yesterday. How are we thinking about potential story angles around that? In our brainstorm this month for the Olympics coming up, I pitched a story about a guide for track and field 100-meter runner, and he is has a vision disability, and his guide has led him for the last 3 Olympics to be able to be side by side running with him. And so how are we thinking about storytelling from that perspective? And so for us, it is one, from a content perspective, the consideration of who and what stories we're telling. And then internally, we have done things like a pay equity analysis to ensure that our employees, for the work that they're doing and the levels that they're at, are being compensated within fair ranges, and committed over 6 figures to rectifying people that were out of range immediately. Creating more support systems within our place of employment. And so that's creating manager training so that our managers can be better equipped to support their employees underneath them, partnering with external DEI consultant firms to say, from a top-down perspective, these are things that we need to put in place. We put in place hiring plans. So for me in the newsroom, as we're hiring new writers, what are the steps that we are taking to make sure we have an equitable process? And so it's been a really, and that's just a few of the things, but it's been a really exhaustive process over this last 15 months to say what has happened before isn't okay. And I try to afford grace for people's lack of knowledge, because you may not have somebody's same lived experience. You may not even be knowing that your person sitting next to you is going through these different things. And I think these last 15 months have shown, no, this is prevalent. This is happening. My people are being impacted, right? And all of us are being impacted in some sort of way. And so from leadership down, trying to say, how can we create a better workplace environment? Our employees are supported. I mean, a big important thing that we talk about is mental health, right? And I'll talk about this from a couple perspectives. Like, how many people, and give me some thumbs up, folks, saw Naomi Osaka, the tennis star, pull out of competition? We saw that, right? Did we see headlines that said, give me thumbs up if you see this, she's spoiled, she's pretentious, you make all this money, you should just shut up and be happy and go play, right? You should go compete. Then we come to find out a couple weeks later, she's been dealing with anxiety, with depression. And it's not that she doesn't want to do her job, but she asked for affordances at work to say, can you give me a little bit of space? I'm gonna still do my job, but I just need a little bit of different space to do it. We in the workplace should be considering how we do that, right? Us as individuals who've been locked up at home, who maybe are managing kids or siblings or jobs or all of these things, how are you coping in the workplace? And so for me, a big priority within my role is, how are we talking about this openly, and how are we bringing these conversations to leadership to say, no, you have to acknowledge that it is not operating as normal right now. We need help, we need support, we need some time off. We need to also be making sure that we're being considerate of these other folks, that a lot of us who are from underrepresented groups, for whatever that means, have already known that we're going through this. It is not a secret to us, but other people, because they may not have that same lived experience, may never have known that this is a struggle you're going through. This is something that's impacting your community. And so being able to talk about that openly at work and say, no, it's not work and then life separate, but all of this is intertwined. And so how are we approaching a more just better workplace from that perspective is something that I've been working on a lot for these last 15 months. And some of the programs and initiatives and pay equity and those things that I talked about are just a small amount of the work that we've been doing at The Athletic to try to create that better work-life balance for what that represents.
Thank you for that, Tina. And I think it's really important, and you capture so much at a very high level. It's understanding one another. You talk about affording grace. We can't do that if we're not taking the time to understand ourselves and those who are different from us. And then it's compassion. We've got to care. That has to mean something. And then once we get there, hopefully we can get to a place of concern rather than jumping to judgment when we hear something like what happened with Naomi Osaka and start having these harsh headlines. What if we were concerned first? What if we asked what's going on first, right? I mean, think about how that applies, not just when it's in a star that's having a very public moment, but day to day, person to person, even as you go through the workshop and you turn your screens on at 1 o'clock here in a moment, when you have a chance to connect with one each other, how can you show that? And then it's action. What do we do about it? How do we fix it? Ashton talked about it early. How do we break those systems that keep us from doing this organically? I'm going to challenge us. What we have, 10 minutes left. Rapid fire career questions. So I'm going to ask that the answers be less than 30, 45 seconds because I'm going to try and get through 4 of them. The first, quick and easy, what is one piece, I won't say one piece, but what's a piece of advice that has helped you throughout your career? Ashton, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just never be afraid to ask questions. And that's something that's helped me immensely. And I'll use that and say, just ideate, prototype, think about design thinking. If you haven't heard of that, that's something that has really helped and shaped my logic, and mentor after mentor after mentor, and people who are still mentoring me, always challenge and empower me to don't be afraid to ask any question and get the knowledge that you need to make the informed decision you need to be great.
Tina?
For me, it's do your job well, and then ask what you could do next. You are not going to get an opportunity to do the next thing that you want to do if you are doing your current job poorly. So execute, do your job very well, and then say, I'm interested in this, I'm interested in that. Are there opportunities for me to get involved?
The one piece of advice I got was from the deputy commissioner of basketball when I started, and I wanted his job. And he said, Vince, make sure you call your mom every day. And I'm like, I'm trying to get a job. What are you talking about? He's like, yes. And one day, none of that will matter. But those phone calls, you'll never regret. What's been a moment? How would you, well, let's just do it quick. A career highlight and why it was important for you. Tina.
So I thought about this. We have everybody, for your context, we get this prep sheet and you're like, I'm thinking about this and what I want. You know, I've been blessed. I've seen a perfect game pitched. I've been in the Super Bowl. I've been in the NBA finals. I've rubbed elbows, been to this party, seen this. And, you know, all of that is cool. But we're here talking about DEI today. And I'm going to say that one of my career highlights was when I quit my job in tech. I had left the sports industry. I was like, I'm done with this. It hasn't been a healthy place for me. I went into tech. I was miserable. Had nothing to do with the company. It just wasn't a fit, right? And I said no for myself. I said, this isn't healthy. This isn't what I want to do for myself. I'm miserable. And I was so scared to fail that I was miserable. And the second I took ownership of myself and advocated for myself and said, no, I'm going to be all right. Like, I will be okay. And I quit with no backup plan. And a week later, I got a consulting job. Like, if you are miserable, you can't hold on to these things to try to say, oh, I'm gonna hold on, but I'm gonna keep going, whatever. Sometimes you got to let things go in order to have the new opportunity come to you. So I wanted to share that with you all today, because that's my career highlight, is saying I chose me instead of the job. And that afforded me to get here today. And I'm so grateful for that decision.
That's awesome.
Man, I think two things quickly. October 21st, 2006 was my career highlight. I played football, as you mentioned, but the special and the specificity of that day was we were down 38-3, 35 points down. And that day in my life, I realized that all things, not anything, all things are possible. Our team ended up rallying and winning 41-38. It's the greatest comeback in NCAA history. Still stands to this day. I had a touchdown in that game. I was on ESPN. Mama, I made it. It was an unbelievable experience. But professionally, I would say I have the ability to serve as the president of the National Association for Academic and Student Athlete Development Professionals right now. And the reason that's so special is my mentor, Dr. Clarence Underwood, was the co-founder of M4A in 1975. He spoke on my first board call 3 weeks ago, and he told me when I was a grad student that I was going to be president of the association one day. And you talk about full circle moment, you talk about that experience and talk about equity, where these spaces have been consumed by others who do not look like me or have my pigmentation. And also to add, I'm the youngest or one of the youngest in our association's history. So that moment is something of my Mount Everest moment, of what I call it, to lead and to have him be alive at 81 years old and be more astute than me. And I can't wait till we're on the stage together in Las Vegas next year to tell the story of our rich tradition.
Awesome. Man, that lets you know you're keeping pretty good company, those quick answers, huh, Pat?
Yeah, that's great. Well, we have one career-related question I wanted to bring up, and then we'll start to close down with one question from Vince. So this is from Ram, and I'm going to invite Ram to the stage. So, one key to breaking in the industry.
I'll start, and then we'll let the other panelists. I think one key to breaking into this industry is understanding the number of people that want to break into this industry. You are literally, I did a program when I was in college. I was a sport management major, and there was a mechanical engineering major in the same program. He wanted the same job that I wanted, right? He was moonlighting as the mascot for the Miami Heat while he worked in his mechanical engineering role, because he wants the same jobs that I want. The competition is stiff, and you've got to find a way to separate yourself. Being here today is one of those ways. So shout out to you.
I'll take it next. Hi, Ram. Thank you for your question. So for me, the way that I got involved, and this is where I would suggest, is start where you are at. So I was at San Diego State going to school, and I was a fan of sports, but I didn't know that I could do it. My classmate, when it was time to go look for our internship, she said, "You like sports? Why don't you go to the athletic department? They need help." And so that's one of the first things that I say is, where are you at school? How can you volunteer there? Do you have if you're interested in the media, can you go to your journalism program, right? Write for your school newspaper. If you are moving into college, if that's the decision that you make for yourself, can you go to your athletic department and say, do you need help in sponsorship? You need help in game day events? You need help in PR? Start with where you're at and ask to get involved there. And that's how I got my foot in the door. I didn't know anybody. I applied blindly. And so you don't have to have a connection. It's just hard work and work ethic.
Ron, thank you for the question, man. I think everything that's been said needs to be retweeted, all the above. And I agree wholeheartedly. I think for me, it was just mainly the will to win and just the ability to know that you will never be denied. You have, each and every one of you have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to break into pro sports, collegiate sports, any area in sports business that you aspire to be, and use and leverage your connections from this from this beautiful summit. I wish I had a chance to be a part of something like this to help me grow. But I will say, use us, leverage the people you just met today. You have a friend, you have a champion in us, and people that we're connected to. In 7 seconds, you make 11 impressions on someone. So by coming in there, the impressions you just left and the intentionality of your question is going to lead you to success. So I'm a firm believer of that.
Great stuff. Thank you, Ram. And then Vince, let's pass it to you to take us out of here.
All right. So we're going to get ready to close out. Appreciate you all being here. I did have one final closing question for our panelists. I'm a huge believer in this concept of the power of sports. Whether it's diversity, equity, inclusion, career focused, or really touching the world. I wanted to get your thought on that. When you hear that, the power of sports, what comes to mind for you?
I'll start this here. For me, the power of sports is, it doesn't matter who you are, what you believe in, what you look like, what your background is, where your parents came from. Sports is a unifier. And as it relates to this conversation today, is that you don't have to be a certain anything to love a team, to love a sport. And so if anybody could be a fan, then why can't anybody work in that field too as a career? And so for me, the power of sport has meant unification and people of all backgrounds celebrating experience, having a collective moment of fandom. And so on the flip side, as it relates to career, if you could be a fan, you should be able to work in that industry as well.
Yeah, I would say I had the privilege this week to witness one of my colleagues hit a hole-in-one in golf. Hole 5, Plum Hollow, 184 feet on a par 3. Never seen it live and live in color, but what was beautiful about it, everything that Tina alluded to, everybody, no matter what happened when we saw it go in the cup, ran to celebrate. And this man is 37 years old, and I'm glad no one got this on video. He jumped in my arms, and I embraced him. And that moment took us to a whole nother level where we're connected for life, because I'll be always telling that story. but the people around us that day in a predominantly sport that's dominated by Caucasian men and women, you see that, well, there's more equitable things like the John Shippen Leadership Institute and other areas where you're seeing golf being exposed to minority in sports. So that was a powerful moment. And that's something that sports does, creates moments that create memories, that create impressions forever and ever.
And I think that's so powerful. And to close, I know we're over time, and I want to remind you all to turn your cameras on for the next session because you get a chance to interact. And I promised Pat I would. I had a very similar experience. Ashton, I was at a hockey game for the first time. And hockey games don't typically do this, but it ended on a buzzer beater. Like there was less than a second left on the clock when he made the final goal. And I was sitting next to this older white gentleman the entire game, and we didn't say a word to each other. In fact, we stood up and stepped over each other without saying anything. It was kind of rude. At the end of the game, when that puck went to the goal, we got up and gave each other the biggest hug. You would have thought we were best friends. And it was really awkward when the game ended because now we're waiting to get down from like the nosebleeds, and we're just standing here beside each other like we didn't just have this lovely embrace. That's the power of sports. What's most important to realize is as the people who are behind the scenes bringing that power to life, how do we use that intentionally? How do we use that intentionally to break down barriers and to create systems of fairness? You all are the future of this industry. We are trusting you to use that power of sports no matter where you choose to go in your careers. I hope that you'll take that responsibility seriously. We thank you for your time today. We thank you for the energy and the emojis. Tina, Ashton, thank you for your time and being with us. Best of luck. Enjoy the rest of the summer over the next few weeks. And like Ashton said, stay in touch, and we'll see you on the playing field.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Hit those emojis and say goodbye. And then we're going to get sucked out of this into the main lobby. And that's how, if you're a professional who is like wondering where you're at right now, you're going to be able to find your table once we get to the lobby. So thank you again, Ashton. Thank you, Tina. Thank you, Vince. We will start our Pathway Roundtables at 10 after 1 and would strongly encourage our students, if possible, to have your videos on. So thanks for that plug, Vince. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone.